Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Live Your Dreams podcast, where we celebrate dreamers who turn their passion into reality. Today, we are thrilled to spotlight a visionary filmmaker whose journey is as inspiring as his work. Having been immersed in the magic of cinema since childhood, discovering his love of film through his father, who introduced him to classics like Star Wars and The Terminator. From earning a full scholarship at USC prestigious film program to directing acclaimed films like The Penitent Man's Chance and The Beta Test, he's carved out a space for bold, independent storytelling. The star-studded thriller, The Activated Man, which will have its theatrical debut December 12th in Beverly Hills. Please welcome us, enjoying the incredible, inspiring Nicholas Gyeney to the Live Your Dreams podcast. Nicholas, you are a phenomenal filmmaker. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I mean, really, we sit down and we get to view a lot of films, and I appreciate every filmmaker that gets a film completed.
Sure.
But when you sit down, you start from start to finish, and then we end up contacting each other, Chris and I, and we say, wow, I mean, The Activated Man, everything about it, from, again, obviously your storytelling to the directing, we'll get into that, but the nuances of your film, the character building, the world development, the sound design, everything, it was beautiful. The production value is great.
Thank you so much. That's it means a lot to hear that. It was a monumental undertaking in this movie, and very ambitious and shockingly short production schedule. We shot this thing in 15 days.
Really? That's incredible. I mean,
It really felt like at times that we had like a guiding hand. It's because everything just had to line up in order to finish it on schedule. And we weren't like abusing the crew doing like 20-hour days. Like we were doing like regular 12-hour turnaround, and somehow we pulled this movie off in 15 days. And so, I'm now at the point where we're about to release it, and I'm finally, starting to breathe. So I'm excited.
breathe. You should. I mean, you should. Yeah, I'm telling you, you're gonna sit there bowing with the accolades you're gonna get, because a 15-day shoot schedule for those outside this business that don't realize there's like rapid fire moving, like you said, Nicholas. Most of the time, a director or a producer that is working under those constraints, I don't want to call it abusing the crew, but they're not working under pleasant circumstances.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly, that's why I brought it up, because, a lot of indie films, I would say most indie films, they're operating on this shoestring budget. I mean, you never have enough money. That's like, I have friends at the top and at the bottom, and they all do the same thing. But a lot of indie films go into it with the knowledge that the only way we're going to pull this off is if people work for free, or we have insane work hours. And I think for you can get away with that a couple of times, but you're gonna start making people upset. And so, over the years, I've made, it's like, I think 8 features now. And my first feature when I was 19 years old, we had that kind of situation. We shot like 60 grand. Everyone was working for nothing. It was just volunteer, and there was no like structured production schedule. It was just a mess, right? And it was like a trial by fire. And I think a lot of indie films suffer from this, and it ends up, exhausting your team, exhausting your crew, and at the end of the day, obviously you want to make the best film you can, but not at the sacrifice of human lives.
No, you're so right. But you can tell the difference, right? Because I don't care if you're working under those circumstances, it is not going to look like The Activated Man. I mean, every shot, every nuance meant something. I loved your storytelling capability, the way you're directing not only your actors, but the movement of the frame, the control, the production design. You felt every single frame mattered with what you did.
I mean, this movie was a very personal movie for me, and so, and there was, I think, a lot at stake as well in terms of my career, because I had done, all these independent features before with name actors, interesting, unique, whatever concepts, but each film to date, it's like they make their money back over time, but there hasn't been that like explosion, that life-changing explosion. And so there was a lot, riding on this movie for me because I've had to because the movies that I've done to date have taken, 3-4 years to recoup the money, which, I mean, the fact that they recouped it all is
That's phenomenal. For indie film, you can add.
the downside is that, I've been doing this full time since I was 19 years old. That's why I'm all white here. And I'm only 38. I'm 38, I mean, people say, "Hey, maybe you should die." And I'm like, "Let them see the war on my face."
Exactly.
But, you know, so because the movies have taken a longer time to recoup, I have had to find new investors for each film, which is
Yeah.
which has been and the universe has just plopped people at the right moments into my lab. But it, at some point I was like, the well is gonna dry up. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna keep meeting these angels, that come out from nowhere and invest in these projects,
Yeah.
And so I think part of what happened that helped this film, honestly, was COVID, because I uh was stuck in my apartment here in Santa Monica
Yeah.
and just thinking about the film all the time and reworking the script and developing things and diving deeper into studying spiritualism, various belief systems, and adding little trinkets of details here and there. And so I think that honestly, that gestation period helped
Hmm.
make it into what it was.
Sure. There was and I loved your journey when you're talking to so many of the characters along their way. You're touching all these different realms of spirituality. So I love that you said that, because I can see that now, how the film was touched by that, and your journey that you probably went through personally to make that journey that the characters are going through is fantastic. So you took a negative, spun it into a positive, and look what you got out of it. That's fantastic.
That's honestly, that was my goal, is that, there's so much negativity and darkness in the world. And honestly, 99.9% of horror movies end on like that negative note. Killer comes back for one last scare, and then the hero dies and all that stuff. I just really wanted to make something that instilled some positivity,
I must say that I love this whole concept of facing your fears and the way you illustrated that.
Yeah.
It's never been done like that before. It's actually gives you hope to face those fears to the very end and to never give up. It's such a great message.
Thank you so much. And actually, to that, actually, one of the things that has been really rewarding on the festival circuit. I've been touring the movie for now about a year,
Sure.
and basically, it was planned to be like a long gestation marketing campaign to kind of slowly build some chatter.
Yeah.
I've been getting messages from people who are like, "Hey, I'm at this film festival in Texas. Your movie's not even playing here, but people are talking about the Activated Man." And that's
Good.
exactly what we're hoping for. But, so, through this gestation period, through this marketing, campaign leading to the release, I've been showing the film to, quite a few different audiences. And what's been really fascinating is the takeaways from different, audiences with different belief systems,
Sure.
And, so, somebody who approaches the film from who is more a spiritual person, uh, will see the movie kind of as like a spiritual journey, a spiritual awakening quest, whatever. But then somebody who may not be very spiritual can take from it like an allegory for mental health struggles and the darkness inside of us. And, literally the Fedora Man could literally be a personification of the darkness within us and what we go through. And so having those conversations with kind of both belief systems has been really fascinating. And that was one of my hopes, when I was developing it, because I wanted the movie obviously to be enjoyable and inspiring for people who are spiritual, but
Sure.
but especially for people who may not have that, aspect of themselves, to give them an access point to let them start thinking about these things and see what they take from it.
It 100% does. 'Cause I'm telling you, I was engaged from both sides like that. That I was thinking that when we were going through, and Chris and I were discussing before we came on the show, it, it can enlighten everybody in different walks of life, and that's what's beautiful. I mean, you created a script that I think transcends And I love the genre of horror thriller, but it transcends that. I mean, you really created such an incredible world. Did you yourself, Nicholas, go through these kind of struggles as were you having these kind of you call 'em night terrors, these kind of things in your mind where you can't sleep, you're visioning things, or was this something that was inspired through outside forces? Because this film seems so personal and real. It's so beautifully written that you can feel like your protagonist in that world it is almost real. It feels so concrete.
Well, thank you, and I would say, there are certainly some, true elements to it, inspirations. I'm not a psychic Jedi warrior that battled the Core Man, but my dog Louis died of cancer, and
Sure.
and Louis, all the little clips in the film of Louis are my
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
and they're actually videos from my iPhone from over the years,
Mhm.
And and so, Louis was like my son, and, I lost my father when I was 12, and I thought that was the worst pain I would ever experience in my life. Never thought anything could be worse than that. And then my dog died in my arms, and it was like, my life had ended.
Yeah.
A piece this dog, I rescued him, and I rescued him at a time where, I went just gotten through, like, a bad breakup and, like, all sorts, personal stuff, so it was like, we rescued each other in a way,
Yeah.
right? And he literally was with me, like, every day for 10 years. He would travel around with me, and it really became like this
Everything.
really
Yes.
close bond. So he died, and, it was trauma, like extreme trauma on me, and, I didn't need to see it coming, and especially he had cancer, and he was fighting it for a year and a half, and so I knew that, my time with him was limited, but, the moment where he went, it was insane, and, there's these quick shots in the film where you see like the flashbacks where Ors is in the ER, right? Like you see this hand rubbing across Louis. So when we were my girlfriend and I were at the ER, Louis was dying, and I was like holding him in my hands, and I didn't know at the time, but she started filming it. And afterwards, I was like, "Why would you film this?" Like, "I don't wanna see this."
Yeah.
But it ended up being this, like, important little detail that we ended up using in this film,
Yeah.
and this years before the film, I hadn't even considered writing the film for, like, almost 2 years after Louis died, and, a year and a half after Louis so, like, it was just this weird, fateful thing that she just happened to record this moment, and so, he died, the trauma, it was really intense, and, yeah, I had very, very vivid dreams, vivid nightmares for a long time, and there was this one night where I had this dream, and Louis was in the dream. Now, I don't know if he came to me as a spiritual visitation or if it was my subconscious wrestling with everything, and
Sure.
it could work both ways. But the reality is that I had a dream and Louis was there. And in this dream, Louis communicated to me, not like CGI and but like, that I needed to tell the story.
Mm.
And I woke up and I was like, okay. And I remembered there was this interview I read a while back with James Cameron, and he was talking about how he came up with the Terminator, which I'm like the biggest Terminator fan.
Oh, well, yeah. You kidding me? Yeah,
We'll
absolutely.
talk about this later, but I actually own the first piece of concept art.
Oh, shit, look at that. That's great. That's fantastic.
James Cameron painted this.
Oh, wow.
Lance Henriksen, who played Bishop in A.
Yeah.
Pop in the original Terminator. So he was the original choice for the Terminator way back.
Yep.
Pitching it. And so James Cameron painted this as Lance as the Terminator,
Wow.
and they showed this to the studio, and this got the green light. But of course, Lance ended up having to step out because they wanted someone big to play the role. And so eventually I made a movie with Lance called The Penitent Man, which you mentioned briefly.
Yep.
And he knew what a huge Terminator fan I was, and so he like surprised me on set a couple days early and brought this painting and gifted it to me.
Oh, that's
Like priceless piece of film history. Now it just sits in my office and I look at it every day. And I'm like, man, you are on the path. Keep fighting. Like
100%.
like literally, if I ever meet James Cameron, I'd be like, I have what created this franchise.
That's beautiful. I mean,
But anyway, it was. I remembered this interview, and he was talking about how he came up with this concept, and he talked about this dream he had where he saw this metal skeleton on fire,
yeah.
and he woke up, right? And like, after everything that I've been through, everything I've experienced making this movie, studying spirituality, I have to think that there was maybe some kind of spirit guide giving him a little push, like, this is what you're supposed to do. And he woke up and he went and did it, And so I want to believe that was Louis coming to tell me that, hey, it's time to make this film and I'll be there with you.
I really love the way you illustrated the dog with the little digital outline and this whole spiritual concept behind it. Many people can identify. My mother even says she's like, her dog's better than people. But so a lot of people can identify with this, but the way you portrayed that was beautiful. I mean, in the spiritual concept, they even say dog spelled backward is God. So it's really just a beautiful relationship that you had in the way you show that. I didn't know it came from a real life experience, but it shows and if you feel it.
I wanted to show the spirit of the dog as, a little bit different. We've seen all sorts of different types of spirits, ghosts, movies, but the idea of energy, right? Like you could scientifically, like the idea of energy particles, right? Like the idea of them clustering, and that is really what we are composed of. So such tightly packed molecules of energy that we feel like it's impenetrable, right? But really it's just particles, right? It's crazy to think about. But so the idea that he can that Orr's that this trauma has like opened up his ability to see this energy layer, and that Louis can come through into this energy layer to show Orr's himself, say, hey, I'm still here. That was the idea, is that, I didn't want it to just be like, the Haunted Mansion or so, like hollow, just like transparent people, I wanted it to be something unique. And so that was one of the things that made me very nervous going into the movie, because if we weren't able to pull off that dog, everything falls apart, right? Like that dog is like the linchpin of the whole film. And so it was up until very close to the end of post-production, I had hired several different VFX artists who's like, yeah, good, I can do it. And they all were like, I can't do this. And just all those different particle systems moving, it's
so hard. I can imagine. No, that's
and and we don't have the budget to hire like 200 marble VFX artists. Like I think I had 12 total in the whole film, handled things, right? And one guy did all the dog stuff. And
it shows. I got to
we would have Zoom calls, and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm working on shot 38, man. Oh my god."
I saw it appear. I'm like, wow. Every nuance is moved. It's so funny because if you think about it and you're not actually understanding the behind the scenes context of how to create it,
right?
Oh, there you go. It's a dog, right? It looks nice. It looks great.
So you're thinking about how much work goes into
everything, and it's constantly in motion, and you're sitting there saying, this is not an easy thing to create. I mean, this is really, it's a selling point.
It's funny. I think about that actually a lot. Like, how often we don't think about how much work goes into films. And, at the end of it, we've got a like a Blu-ray disc, this little disc. That's got this movie on it. That was comprised of hundreds of people working really hard. So many hours of intense work and arguments and laughter and all tears and everything. But it's all reduced down to this little disc, and it's just so fascinating how that works. It's just like at the end of the day, all you have is this little package, and that's it.
It's incredible as the work. Yeah. You talk about a package, right? So as a writer director, you're creating this incredible world, and and I cannot wait for people to get to see this film. But you are working under a constraint schedule. 15 shooting days, and you as the writer director has to go out there, convince the producers, the crew, the people involved, the actors to believe in your vision. And now when you read a script like this is a horror film, a thriller film. It's in that kind of genre, right? It's a thriller, I would say, more than anything else. But this is not a typical script where it's like, all right, an act comes in and cuts a head off. You can visualize that as somebody reading it, right? An actor or producer, somebody comes involved. Your script is so detailed in different ethereal worlds, and really it has to go through these, you're seeing this dog in a certain way. How was it explaining people to get involved with this incredible vision when it was just words on a page without this beautiful film in front of them?
I mean, I think I've always had like, they say like something like only 25% of people can like actually visualize. Very interesting. But I've always had this ability to just see the movie in my head. Ever since I was a kid, I would just visualize very clearly anything. And so I think, I just developed the ability to communicate what I'm seeing.
Right.
And so as I'm sitting down, I'm pitching to like Tony Todd or the various actors. I'm really just telling them like, this is what I see, and I want it to be grounded and as realistic as possible. And, I talk about movies that were kind of inspirations in terms of aesthetic, like Insidious was a big one because I love the way Insidious took a very grounded approach to approach the spirits. You had actors; they're physically there, maybe lit a little differently with some makeup, but we're not doing the haunted mansion thing, And so it not the over reliance on CGI and having scare scenes that take place during the day, right? Because that's something you don't see very commonly.
Yeah.
Approaching this as this is a horror movie in the real world is kind of how I pitched it.
That's a great way. Again, understanding the vision to do that, because right, most people can't see a vision, and saying like that horror movie in the daytime is going to be like this is a great way of kind of explaining it. But beyond that, the characters you also created have real depth. I mean, you see the struggle between your two lead love interests. One's a police officer, one's there, and the way they interact with each other, especially, and I'm not going to spoil any moments, but you see their journey together, and there's struggles, there's things that happen there, but yet you feel this kind of underlying love, appreciation. How was it working with actors like that? But then again, going and working with, people like Sean Young and again, people Kane Hodder, who's a legend in the horror world that's in there. I mean, you had such a great cast of characters. How was it for you to be able to communicate? But again, it's such a short, you had 15 days. You couldn't sit in there and, go to people's trailers and spend hours explaining a scene. This was a very, fast moving schedule.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that it was very important to me as we were leading up to production was I made sure that we had time to rehearse with, especially the actors playing Ors and Sarah, because obviously we follow them through a lot of the events of the film. And so I met with them several times and we went through everything scene by scene and the minutia of everything. And I told them at the end of our rehearsal sessions, I was like, look, we have no time to make this movie. So on set, we don't have time to like debate things, and so when I say we're going to do this, we just got to do it, right? All the ideas, any inspirations, whatever, we got to get those out before we start shooting. I mean, a quick thing like, hey, what about a shot of this? That's
Yeah, of course.
like if you're going to stop for an hour and like debate the meaning of a scene and the dialogue or whatever, you're going to kill the shooting schedule.
Yeah.
Right? And on this kind of a schedule, you just don't have that luxury. So I made it very clear, like we need to, all that stuff we got to deal with before production. And thankfully, for the most part, they adhered to that. There were like 2 times where like they were like trying to ask questions about something like, we already talked about this. We're going to go from point A to point B. We already talked about it.
If you had your chance, it's over. That's it.
Building in that rehearsal schedule was really, really important given the complexity of everything. But I think especially for the actors playing Ors and Sarah, I think what made it interesting for them was that, typically in horror, I mean, it's, let's say, a cliche, like guy or girl starts seeing something and the spouse or significant other is like, you're crazy, and And I really wanted to turn that on its head with this, and I wanted to make it an introspective journey for Ors. So he thinks he's going crazy.
Oh yeah.
She is the one supporting him. Is she saying, no, I think that you are going through this, which is a total reversal from what we were used to, right? I think that made it more interesting for them. Just it's not like a formulaic kind of supernatural thriller, right? And then with Sean, I think she really resonated with the material because she's very sorry.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And so she connected with it on that level. And she was even advising me to delay shooting because we were shooting during Mercury retrograde. And I was like, well, we can't just,
Yeah.
we can't just do that. But funnily enough, getting through production was this like crazy siege. Like I told you. Yeah, she really resonated with it, and I think for Tony and for Kane, I think what really struck them, especially for Kane, it was a chance for him to really shine dramatically.
It was great.
And lets him get a chance to act in most of the stuff he does.
Mhm.
And so this was a chance to show the world, like, hey, I can act,
Yeah.
And Tony, I think he was a very spiritual man as well. And so I think, and he also was a big lover of animals like I am. And so we connected on that level. But, Tony was known for, I have to get used to saying so he was known for playing the bad guy, and he was a very intimidating presence in his big gigs there. Save for one, which is one of my favorite indie movies ever. It's called The Man from Earth. If you haven't seen it,
I did figure it out. No, I will. Okay.
really, but it's really like the one time that I can think of that he was able, aside from The Activated Man, where he was able to be like human and sentimental, and so this was I think really made him want to be a part of this, is because he was able to give this dramatic performance, which of course now is his final lead role, right? So it's this kind of interesting thing that
He was phenomenal. I loved him. Really, the second when they bump into each other, there's some kind of omnipresence, right? Like he just has a bigger than life.
That bigger than life quality, and his voice and the history of his body of work kind of influences this suspense of like, is he good or not?
You don't know. You're exactly right. Oh, Kane, but again, it's beautiful. Everything you did there was just the way you created these characters, their juxtapositions of each other was fantastic. It was great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
There's too much to say. I mean, you can almost spoil the movie. Like,
I know.
yeah, I don't want to say you could talk about. Yeah,
Just bleep the spoilers.
I'll tell you, the audience is going to. They're going to love this. And we'll bleep that, cut that little thing out there. But I don't want to give anything away. No, 100%. You're gonna love it. It's so amazing you created. That's why it's so exciting to talk about it. I mean, rarely do we get to see it. Again, I always appreciate any filmmaker's creation, but from start to finish, I felt like we're at the premiere in my head. You know what I mean? Like I truly loved sitting there and just watching your screener. It was fantastic.
Thank you so much. I will. So the one hope that I can get from audiences is that they really truly watch the film, and I'll expound on that. I think a current social climate, culture. I meet a lot of people on the festival circuit, and we talk about watching movies. I talk with a bunch of movie critics about like how they find the time to review all these films, and the common thread is that with our reliance on our little devices these days, a lot of people don't actually really watch movies.
Yeah.
They're like on, and you're watching, but then every couple minutes you're checking your phone and like, what was that? Okay, and so every time you look away from the screen, you are missing
Sure.
on scale. and potentially even story, points. And so while you might get the gist of it, right? Like you're not allowing yourself to be absorbed.
Yeah.
Right. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that I tried to do is I wanted to create it as kind of like a slow burn
Yes.
narrative where you're like,
Yeah.
like leaning in further.
Oh, I was on the edge
And-
of my seat.
and then it
The
kicks,
story-
and it kind of slowly just picks up. And then by the last 30 minutes, you're like, what the
Exactly. Exactly.
right? It just gets insane. Like once you get to the last act, you're like, am I watching the same movie? See,
It's like that.
it's like a rabbit hole, right? But so that approach is very much designed for audiences who will give themselves over to
Yeah.
the film and watch the film and allow them to be swept up with that slow burn and just go on the ride. If you're sitting there watching this movie, checking your phone every few minutes, and you look up and they're talking, I mean, it's gonna might be boring. Like
It's still funny you said that. You're absolutely right, because I think you may miss so many nuances that are happening. You're missing
there's
the
a lot going on in this, specifically in this film. There's so many layers and so many things that are discussed, so much world building that's talked about that if you're gonna go on this ride and you really need to go, like, give yourself over to it and give it a real chance. And that's my one request is, well, watch it, is that, they just watch the movie, right?
I gotta say, when I was watching, especially the scene with Sean Young and her son, and the character, her son, when she was just sitting there doing nothing, I was on the edge of my seat. And then how you actually entered that world in a different way, which is beautifully done.
Thank you. That's stuff like that. Those moments of silence
Oh, powerful.
can be very powerful if you allow them to be, right? If you sit there and let yourself in and feel it and see what's happening, feel the scene. Those moments, to a social media baby, they might consider that boring content.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But in the context of the story and the flow of the film, that can be, it could be pretty affecting if you let it.
No, you're absolutely right, because we discussed that with Sean in our previous interview with her, and her face lit up, and she was like, "You're absolutely right," because that is what it's all about. It's not about the dialogue there, which is great later. We're not going to go into that, but those moments of silence that are built right there. It's because you built this world, and all this is happening, and there's a great moment where the protagonist goes in, and there's a connection, but nothing is said. Everything is said in that moment, and for you as a writer and director to have the guts to create a scene like that in 2024 says a lot about you. And you said it right there, how you want to see your story perceived. Nicholas, that's brilliant. Really, I have to say it like that. As a creator, that's phenomenal. What you're doing is great.
It's funny because, I went to USC Film School,
Yeah.
studied under the greats and all that, but I never took a screenwriting course.
Oh shit. Yeah.
And so, like, when I'm writing, I'm always, because I have friends who've, many writer friends, and they get molded into this kind of like box of how we need to do this. And I have always approached my filmmaking emotionally. So, like, when I'm writing, I'm not sitting here going like, "Gosh, it's page 15. I need an action beat."
Yeah.
As I'm writing, I'm like, "Does it feel right?
Mm.
Does it feel right?" And one thing that I'm noticing a lot in films and TV, that's coming out today is that there's been a shift in the way that movies are made. Like the way they look, the way they feel, the way how dialogue, the storylines. I talk about Marvel, the Marvel machine a lot, and I'm a huge superhero nerd.
Yeah.
But I for years and years, I've watched all the Marvel movies, but they have kind of created a monster in the sense that they've developed this formula that I call Marvel jokey jokes. And because Marvel is so successful, Hollywood looks at that and they go, "Oh, we must do this," right?
Mhm.
So what Marvel has created, which has now permeated as like kind of the standard in narrative, in narrative structure, is this idea that, like, in extreme moments of peril and drama and intensity and suspense, some character is got to say something funny and just
Yeah.
completely flatten the moment.
Right? I mean, it's like it takes you right out of there. Yeah.
You're literally about to crash your air. I think what was the movie? It was the latest the last Jurassic World movie. What? Yeah. Like crashing the plane, and Chris Pratt is like making jokes, and I'm like, would we would just be thinking like, "Shit, oh my god!" Like like you would not be making jokes.
Yeah.
That kind of, and so when I go back and watch movies, we did not know how good we had it in like the 80s and 90s. When we were in the 80s and 90s, people were like, 80s and 90s cinema, garbage, but now we look back and it's like, you look at the way that levity and jokes and one-liners even were done then, and it's much more natural back then.
The 80 one-liners were natural, 100%.
And now everything is very like, oh, well, now we need a jokey joke, And so when I was approaching writing this movie, my priority was I wanted to make movies like I grew up loving.
There you go.
Like I would love to see cinema go back to embracing the not necessarily like shooting on film, but like just the way films were put together and constructed back then. Why what happened?
Yeah.
It's very strange, very strange. It's like almost like 2003, 4.
The shift. You're right. Yep.
And the era of 90s and 80s cinema just came to an end. It's very interesting.
It's kind of odd like that, right? You think about obviously being a student of cinema that you are. I mean, that 90s era, especially take that like era of 93, 94 to 97 when you had those movies like Quiz Show and, Shank and Pulp Fiction and this Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, these people coming out that were storytellers. That was like almost a beckoning back to the Scorseses, the Lucases, and you're going back. I mean, those two eras of that 90s generation, 70s. I love that story. Fantastic.
But even movies that are underrated, like there's a great like action movie from '96 called Executive Decision.
Absolutely.
It's like such a thriller and like real well be seen. And you have this twist of Steven Seagal dying like 20
First minute. I mean, he's out the pay. Yes, they're already still coming.
But like every time I watch a movie like Executive Decision or like Demolition Man or like I sit there and I'm like, they just don't make movies like this anymore.
I feel like put in with Jean Renault and absolutely, yeah.
It was almost like I wonder if The Matrix is to blame for all this. It's like what does it really became about CGI and wire work kind of after that, So I don't know what it was, but yeah, it's just not done anymore like that. And I and the same I think can be said about music. When you watch horror movies today or in any, there's very rarely like a memorable theme in scores. I just watched Gladiator 2, which I really enjoy. It doesn't hold a candle to the first movie, but I did very much enjoy it. But one of the things that I realized as I was watching it was like, man, they really should have brought Hans back to do this.
What a difference is.
Score was not didn't have that all the memorable moments in the score were callbacks to the first film.
Yeah.
And so that's a common thing in films today. I mean, I think about like Marvel, right? Like most of the Marvel movies, I mean, the Avengers theme is fairly narrow.
Yeah.
Most of the score is just kind of like throwaway,
Yeah.
You think back in like Jurassic Park,
Yep.
Memorable themes from the past, and that's just very, very uncommon now. And so I remember when I was in post and putting the film together, and one of the producers was like, I was showing the scene where Fedora Man comes out from like the mist and kitchen, right? And I had this Fedora Man theme. I guess. And the guy was like, why you having this melody? Like it should just be like creepy sounds. I'm like, no, like that's how they would do it today. But that's just okay. Maybe that's unsettling, but this is an iconic moment. This is the villain coming out from the shadows. Like there's a sort of like a tongue-in-cheek romance with the way films were made, romanticism, the way films were made, that is missing today. Like today movies are more like clinically produced, then
Well said. Yeah.
romance is kind of missing. And so when you have this villain moment and the villain theme plays, like it's a very romantic thing, you know? And so
Certainly, yeah, like a visceral response. A visceral response where you feel in your core. That's what I was feeling in the film.
and s- that's the kind of stuff that I want to go back to. And that's the way that's the kind of movies that I grew up loving. And you know, it's so funny because I watch movies now and I sound like, you know, like my dad or like my grandpa or like, these movies today are so crap, you know, and I'm like, well, here I am, you know, full circle. But yeah, I would love to bring it back to memorable themes and memorable music, and music is such a big part of this movie. It's like, you know, I kind of equate it to, you know, like almost like a Christopher Nolan movie, the way like the music is essentially like taking you for the journey, you know, through through the narrative, and so yeah, I really wanted, you know, that kind of stuff to be memorable.
The Hans's proteges on this film. Who did the score?
The score, that was a monumental thing in itself. So basically, one of the Cesar Baisha, good friend of mine, he slaved over the score as I, you know, stood over the whip. But one of the things, you know, one of the realities of making a movie like this is that so we had $1 million to make the movie,
Okay.
and you know, most really indie filmmakers would be like, wow, that, you know, that's a lot of money.
No.
But the reality is that when you're paying like living wages and
Yeah.
12-hour turnarounds and all these effects and other things, I mean, that goes out the window, and all these name actors, like that goes very quickly, very quickly. And so one of the realities is that this movie was extremely ambitious. You
Yeah.
know, basically trying to achieve a movie that looked like around $10 million for a television.
Phenomenal. And it does. It looks fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you. And so one of the trade-offs is that you're going to end up hiring people who are maybe a little more green,
Mhm.
because you can afford them.
Yeah.
And so I had this his friend Cesar. He is a extremely talented musician, like probably a genius, but you know, he didn't quite have a full grasp at the time of like cinematic language.
Yeah.
And so he and I worked. I mean, it took like 7 months to do the score.
Wow. Yeah.
Because we worked extremely close together. I was literally crafting, like I crafted a temp score using music from other films, like to the minutia. Like
Yes.
here, the note goes up, you know, and then the note goes down. You know,
The score. He's more of a talented musician that really
right. I mean, so I mean, he'd know how to score, but not to the specificity that this movie required.
Sure. That did. I mean, every moment. Yeah.
And so, right, every moment was very like, I mean, the intent was that it was very carefully constructed, right?
Yes.
And so we had this very articulated temp score, and we basically had to construct an original score that hit the beats basically, and created the same emotional response.
I mean, there's a scene, I'm not going to describe it too well, but you know what I'm talking about. They're in I'm going to say the word store, but the poor man comes out, and between the score and the gaffing and the light, and like, it's insane. I really, what you created there, you're drawn into the environment. I loved it. Like, and it's the truth, because without the score, you were so specific, Nicholas, and what you wanted, not only through the music, but the lighting, everything that was happening had to come together to fit your vision. And as a director, you did to control all this, to make people see your vision and bring it all together. Really
Thank you.
phenomenal. It was, and every scene counted because it worked, and you got to feel exactly what you were going through, and you wanted your audience to feel in those scenes. So hard to do on a limited budget. Which again, people outside the scope may think what you said is a lot of money. When you're talking living wages in this business, there's probably 150 people working on a movie like that. That is not a lot of money, and that will go incredibly quickly. That's nothing.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny. When I think back to like my days at USC, and certainly I, you know, took away many things from there, but I think a lot of my education, probably most of my film education, has come from just studying movies
Sure.
and
Yeah.
watching them, and watching like why does this scene work so well, and what about, you know, and deconstruct, you know, as I'm watching, I'm like, ooh, the lighting here, and oh, that's an interesting choice of shot for that moment. And but so studying that as I just watch movies as a movie fan, I think has helped me, you know, make scenes work better at the end of the day, right?
No, I never felt like you wasted a moment. And again, you've, and I'm never, I love creation, right? So I'm not knocking scripts. But in independent films especially, there's a lot of wasted scenes because there's no governor. So there's a lot of scenes that feel like they stop the flow of the movie.
Right.
That wasn't happening here. You know what I mean? Which is great.
I one of the things that I have this friend. I'm gonna do a name drop. His name is Shane Black. He's a incredibly talented writer director. He created Lethal Weapon.
Yeah.
He directed like Iron Man 3 and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and stuff. So I had the beautiful opportunity to connect with him after I moved to LA, and I picked his brain a lot about writing and directing. And I remember he said something to me that really stuck with me, and it was a very simple thing. He said every single scene has to do something.
Yeah. Move it.
Yes. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Every single scene has to do something. And then as a tag, is this the most interesting way this scene can be told?
Yeah.
Given the limitations of budget or whatever, et cetera, outside forces, is this the most interesting way to tell this scene? That's him. He doesn't even have to read the script. That's literally life-changing advice for a writer, right?
Phenomenal. Yeah.
So as I'm developing the script, I'm just like, every scene has to do something and mean something. And if it doesn't, then why is it here?
Why is he here? Exactly.
And there was like a little, I remember like there was this in an earlier draft, there's this simple scene, it's the next morning in the beginning of the movie where Orz is sitting on his bed. Sarah comes in, she's on her way to work, right? And he notices this necklace with the crystals and the Eye of Horus and, protection and all that kind of stuff. And in an early draft, that necklace was not there. And they were just like talking about those kinds of things.
Random stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, and every time I would read it, I'm like, this is not the most interesting way that this scene could be told. So interesting because adding this necklace, which ended up being an interesting thematic thing later, with this, adding this necklace allowed for the scene visually to be just much more interesting because now they're talking about, it's like business essentially, right? Like you give the actor something to touch and talk about and something visual rather than just talk. So little things like that can turn a scene from 80% to 100%.
You're absolutely right. And it's great that you talked about having mentors, people to look at and take this advice in because again, for our listeners of this show, Live Your Dreams podcast, a lot of young writers, a lot of our own directors, people want to be like yourself, Nicholas. It's all about, like you said, listening to these people. Well, you said you listened. You said Shane gave you that great advice. If it doesn't need to be there, it doesn't need to be there. So many first-time writers, and any first-time writer does this, you have so much stuff that you're unwilling to cut. Your ego gets in the way, and you have this inflated script and movie that goes nowhere. And it feels like 20 minutes takes 4 hours to go by, and it's because of that.
Right. Yeah. There is, and look, I mean, I feel like my journey has humbled me quite a bit.
Sure.
Like I've made, like I said, 8 feature films, and each one is like, it's like this dangled carrot. It's like, you're almost there, almost there.
Yeah.
Every time it's like, I get knocked down and I pick myself back up. And I mean, I certainly have, I'm human. I have pride and I have my ego that I battle, like everyone else. But I definitely, I've been very, I've pushed myself to be very grounded and open because, you don't know if the best idea is going to come from your executive producer or your janitor or whatever, like you never know. And so it's so to be closed down to input, you're just hurting yourself.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. I mean, you really, Nicholas, what you created here is phenomenal. Now, the theatrical debut is December 12th. It's coming up.
That's the VIP premiere. That actually is Friday the 13th.
Okay, so what we need to do is we need to get links from you. So out there, because we'd love to put them in the description. We'll make sure this episode is out before.
Sure.
So if you can believe it or not, we just came up on the hour almost. Again, you see about like it flies by as you're seeing. Like it's like because when you have passionate artists out there that are doing what they're doing, you are an inspiration to everybody. Because again, this is not only about your phenomenal work, your movie out there, but it's inspiring others. Before we have to go, Nicholas, you gave so much advice. But for young artists, directors, kids that are going to USC right now that want to get to that next level. A little piece of advice you would give people to break into this business? Because like you said, it's a lot of getting knocked down and coming back up.
Yeah. And I will say this is not going to be what you expect.
Yeah.
If there is anything else in the world that will make you happy, do that instead. Because this is a disease. And I am afflicted with this disease. And that is the only reason that I have been able to keep going and make these movies, because there is nothing that will fulfill me like making films does. The feeling that I get making it and showing it to an audience, and seeing an audience member come to tears or appreciate it, or that fulfills me to a degree that I can't really even communicate. And if I were to give this up, I would be empty. But there are a lot of people out there who go into film school and want to be a filmmaker and producer or whatever. But there are other things, but maybe their priority is just making money or having a family or whatever it is. But if there is anything else that will completely fulfill you, walk away, because this is a siege. This is a siege.
Excellent advice. That's excellent advice.
Phenomenal words from a phenomenal individual. Nicholas Gyeney, everybody, the activated man, December 13th is going to be phenomenal. I'm telling you, very rarely do you get to watch a film crafted this well from start to finish. Your passion for the business, who you are as an individual. We would love to have you back on anytime. Open invitation, anything you're working on, even to re-promote the film on new platforms. Nicholas, you are an inspiration. I know our listeners are going to learn a lot from you. Thank you so much for coming on the Live Your Dreams podcast.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate the time.
I love it. Thank you so much, my friend. This has been fantastic. Again, The Activated Man, December 13th. We'll have links below in all the descriptions on iHeartRadio, Audible, Spotify, along with our YouTube links and every other major podcast platform out there. I'm Joe Gawalis for my fantastic co-host,
Liz Victor.
Nicholas. Thank you so much. Nicholas Gyeney, The Activated Man. We'll have links below. Thank you so much, everybody. We are the dreamers, and the dreams make the world go around. And remember that great advice Nicholas gave to all the listeners at the end of this amazing episode, because this is something you're not going to want to miss. Thank you, Nicholas, so much.